afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's lecture titled Pakistan and the Changing Asian Scenario. It is brought to you jointly by ISAS and the Pakistan High Commission here in Singapore. Today's lecture will examine the future outlook of Pakistan in the current geopolitical environment and assess how the country can navigate the challenges ahead. We are delighted today to have with us our guest speaker, Senator Mushahid Hussain Saeed. He is the Senator of Islamabad Capital Territory and the Chairman of Senate Defense Committee in the Government of Pakistan. I would now like to invite Associate Professor Iqbal Singh Sivia, the Director of ISAS, to give his opening remarks. Dr. Iqbal, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Claudia. Good afternoon, Senator Hussain Saeed, Excellency, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Institute of South Asian Studies, ISAS, I welcome you all to this afternoon's lecture jointly hosted by ISAS and the Pakistan High Commission, Singapore. Today's talk is titled Pakistan and the Changing Asian Scenario. Asia, like much of the world, is grappling with geopolitical and economic challenges and negotiating its way out of a pandemic. On the geopolitical front, it is no surprise to say that we are witnessing a world in flux. Many states in Asia fear being entangled in the competition between the United States and China. But there are also rivalries within Asian states that are impacting the regional architecture. Tensions between India and China, for instance, may impact small states or smaller states in South Asia and beyond. At a more immediate level, Russia's invasion of Ukraine has spurred fears of a widening conflict and affected economies across Asia. Supply chains that had been hit by the COVID-19 pandemic were further disrupted by the war in Ukraine. This in turn led to concerns, or wide-ranging concerns I should say, including those over soaring oil prices and food security. While there are serious concerns and challenges, states in Asia have also been presented with opportunities. For instance, the rise of minilateral institutions that are complementing or challenging, whichever way you look at it, the existing multilateral structures present both challenges and opportunities. There is also the potential of further diversification of manufacturing and the development of new supply networks. We are delighted to have with us today Senator Hussain to share his thoughts on how Pakistan can negotiate the evolving geopolitical landscape. As we meet today, Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif has just completed a visit to China. This, coupled with recent developments, including the US supplying of equipment to maintain the F-16 fighter aircraft and the visit of Pakistani Army Chief General Bajwa, have led to speculation about Pakistan's strategic balancing of the US and China in the new geopolitical environment. Given Senator Hussain's long-standing experience in shaping policy in Pakistan, but also in the realms of journalism and academia, I think he's most apt to speak on this topic. Like all of you, I look forward to hearing his thoughts and to the question and answer session that will follow the talk. So thank you all for joining us. Senator Hussain, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon and Assalamu alaikum. And I'm very grateful to Professor Iqbal Singh Sivia for inviting me. And I also warmly welcome the Pakistan High Commissioner, Madam Rukhsana Afzal Sahiba, who's one of the best and the brightest in the Pakistan Foreign Service. And also welcome Mr. Singh from the Indian High Commission. Sir, there's a place you can occupy that. And I'm also particularly pleased that I just discovered that Professor Iqbal Singh was named Iqbal by his grandfather for the great Allama Iqbal, the poet of the East. And I think that shows intellectual globalization, the impact of the great Allama Iqbal. And as we speak about the changing Asian scenario, two of Iqbal's predictions, which he made 90 years ago, have proven to be correct. He talked of Dekh Mashriq se ubarte hue suraj ko dekh. See the sun rising from the east. It was about the resurgence of Asia. And he mentioned that. And then he mentioned about China. Again, about before the Chinese Revolution, when China was mired in civil war and conflict and was a weak and poor country in the 30s, he said, Himalaya ke chashme ubhalne lage, और गरा ख्वाब चीनी संभलने लगे, गया दौर सरमायादारी गया, तमाशा दिखा के मदारी गया. That the springs of hope are emanating from the Himalayas, and the great Chinese nation is rising from slumber. So I think that shows the insights. So I think he chose the right name, and also he's did a PhD on Dr. Iqbal also. Ladies and gentlemen, Pakistan has been in the eye of the storm, so to speak, metaphorically, for the last almost 40 years. I remember when I went to Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. to study international... Assalamu alaikum ji. How are you, sir? To study international relations. I read European history, and I read about the 30-year war, which started in 1618, ended in 1648, the Treaty of Westphalia. And I said, these Europeans were actually fighting for 30 years. How come? You know, in my own lifetime, I've seen a war next door for last 42 years, from 1979 to 2021 in Afghanistan, in which Pakistan directly or indirectly has been involved as a neighbor or as a participant. So when we talk of Pakistan, the one word that describes Pakistan, the state and the society of Pakistan, is resilience. In this period, we have seen 3 Afghan wars, 3 Gulf wars, 3 near wars with India, demise or decline of 2 superpowers, nuclearization of South Asia, and major transformations, geopolitical, political also. The political map of the region changed. Soviet Union ceased to exist. Iran from a monarchy became a radical Islamic republic. So that transformation has been happening right next to Pakistan, and we have had a ringside seat to that. Briefly, I'd like to also mention about Pakistan's role vis-a-vis this region, Southeast Asia, because normally people feel that our focus has been on that area. This is an area which has been very important for Pakistan also. Our great leader, the founder of Pakistan, Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah, supported the liberation struggle of the people of Indonesia against Dutch imperialism before the creation of Pakistan, when he sent messages to Dr. Sukarno and Dr. Hatta in 1945. And this island of Singapore contributed to the liberation movement of the people of South Asia, because in February 1942, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, the great freedom fighter, launched the Indian National Army, INA, in Singapore. And that played a big role when at the last lap of the British Empire, the breaking up, because then there were mutinies in the Air Force, Indian Navy. So Singapore was directly, I think that history people forget. It was about 20,000 prisoners of war of India, both Muslims, Sikhs and Hindus. Of course, India was united then, who played a role with the Indian National Army. My own uncle, who later on became a very famous hockey star, he was Colonel Ali Iqtidar Shah Dara. Colonel Dara, he was a hockey player. He played hockey in front of Hitler in the 1936 Berlin Olympics. He was also part of the Indian National Army. There were a lot of... The General Shah Nawaz, who served in the Indian National Congress in India, he was part of that. There were others also. So Singapore also contributed to our freedom struggle. And we, in turn, when Singapore became independent in August 1965, we were one of the few countries which were helping Singapore very actively. We were very close then to Indonesia. And Indonesia had a problem with Malaysia, confrontasi under Dr. Sukarno. And because of that, we helped in Singapore's transport system, shipping lines, and also the Singapore Airlines. The creation was done by the PIA. So we have had a role in the nation building of Singapore, which I think is a very positive thing. And then we have still a very strong expatriate population which is there, who are very distinguished, who have expertise and experience, and who are contributing to Singapore society and the development of Singapore in the last 50 plus years. And I personally also had the honor and pleasure of hosting in 1992 when the great Asian statesman Lee Kuan Yew came to Pakistan. And he has written in his book about his visit to Pakistan from the third world to the first world. And I was one of those who hosted him, and I had meetings with him. And we wanted to learn from Singapore and, of course, from the great statesmen. And we are not the only ones. The Chinese visionary leader Deng Xiaoping, when he did the reform and opening up, the first country he chose to visit was Singapore in 1978. And he said, and the first industrial park established in China was in 1992. It was done through Singapore. So Singapore has a tremendous contribution. And I came here in the 60s. I was a child then. My father was Pakistan's first military attaché in Indonesia. And after coming from Indonesia, we came to Singapore. And from Singapore, we went on a ship back to Pakistan, first to Bombay and then to Karachi. And Singapore was then, I remember the Rafael's Hotel and the rickshaws, and it was a bit like a swamp, but what a amazing transformation. So this shows, I think, the Asian spirit of resurgence, creativity, and resilience, which is also demonstrated by the people of Pakistan. Ladies and gentlemen, the transformation which we are seeing in the region, in Asia, reminds me of a saying of the Russian leader Lenin, and he said, there are decades when nothing happens, and there are weeks when decades happen. And I think that the profound transformation of the world order, which we are seeing today, is probably once in a century, or maybe a couple of times in a century we see that. And I think 3 or 4 of those changes are very, very profound. There is a shift in the global balance of economic power away from the West to the East, to Asia. I think we are seeing the dawn of the Asian century. And I personally, as a student of politics, feel that the American century, which started after World War II with the demise of the British Empire, that ended on 15th August 2021 when the Taliban captured Kabul. And so that marked one phase of history, and I think a new phase of history is there. And we saw the retrenchment of American power in the larger Muslim world, in the Middle East and our region also. So there is that one fundamental reality. The second one is, of course, the rise of China, which again is a very unique development. It is a historical development because it's not just a rise of a country, it's also a rise of a civilization, rise of an Asian power. And I think it was President Macron of France who said 3 months ago when he addressed French diplomats in Paris that the era of Western domination is coming to an end. And I think the rise of China is a very important new reality in that. In our region also, and Professor Iqbal Singh Sevia mentioned the visit of the Pakistan Prime Minister yesterday to China, where the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which is the flagship of the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, which was launched by President Xi Jinping 7 years ago. And I think that's probably the most important diplomatic and developmental initiative of the 21st century. CPEC is the flagship of that. And major initiatives have been taken on CPEC. And you can see that the first visitors to China after the 20th Party Congress of the Communist Party of China, first was Vietnam. And Vietnam has announced that friendship with China will be the top priority of Vietnamese foreign policy. Second was Pakistan, with whom we have China and Pakistan have an iron brotherhood, a strong relationship, which is above party lines, irrespective of any government in Pakistan, irrespective of any person. This is one relationship which is the cornerstone of Pakistan's foreign policy, on which there is a broad national consensus among the political parties, among the provinces of Pakistan, because China is a time-tested neighbor and a reliable friend. So that has also promoted regional connectivity. And I think that is a third major development where you are seeing Pakistan being the hub of that connectivity, or trying to emerge as the hub of that connectivity. We are talking of the region South Asia, and in fact, I feel that we're talking of a greater South Asia, not just South Asia as a geographical concept, which includes India and Pakistan and Bangladesh and Sri Lanka and Nepal, Bhutan and the Maldives, but a greater South Asia that includes China, that includes Myanmar, that includes the Central Asian republics of Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Iran and Afghanistan. Driven by economy, energy, ports, pipelines, roads, railways. And in fact, there's so many talk of pipelines. We are talking of the Iran-Pakistan pipeline, which included India also. Then there's TAPI, the Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India pipeline. Then there's CASA 2000 with Tajikistan. That people said there will be also a pipelinistan in the region because of this energy being the future. And I think the Ukraine crisis has drawn focus on that. So this region is going through great changes. And I have studied for 4 years in the United States as a student in Georgetown University School of Foreign Service in Washington, D.C. I worked there also in the U.S. Congress as an intern in my student days. But I've seen a major transformation also, and I think this is extremely important. We are seeing in parts of the West very right-wing religious extremism driven by a lot of racism also and a lot of bigotry. And we have seen what happened in Sweden. We have seen what happened in Italy. And yesterday's election results in Israel also are there. I think the RSS is also in power in Israel, it seems, after yesterday, Netanyahu. And, so this is a very important transformation. And that will draw new battle lines, I think, in the region. And that will also have an effect. When we talk of Pakistan's foreign policy, when we talk of our relations in the region, 4 countries are going to be key in that. Their relationships. Pakistan and India, India and China, and China and US. So these key relationships will be the determinant of the future direction of how the region will shape up. The problem arises, in my view, when countries start following ideological foreign policies. We made that mistake in those Afghan jihad years, and we paid a heavy price for that in Afghanistan. We learned those lessons. We have hosted the largest number of refugees for the longest duration in history, which no other country has done, and that's Pakistan. 4 million Afghan refugees for 4 decades, and now we're doing it on our own. But our policy has towards Afghanistan is that, yes, it's a new reality. We would like to have good relations with neighbors, but we don't want to interfere in internal affairs. But I think that Americans made a mistake after 9/11. They started an ideological foreign policy under the neocons. And they wanted to have regime change. They wanted to transform the Muslim countries. And as a consequence of what they did in the so-called war on terror, in those 20 years, they spent $6.5 trillion. And this is the figures from the Brown University Institute for the Study of Conflict. So these are American figures I'm quoting. $6.5 trillion in 20 years in parts of Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Libya, Somalia. 900,000 people were killed. 30 million were either homeless or refugees. 324,000 drones, bombs, and missiles were thrown in these countries. So the consequences were horrendous. And when we talk of the China-US competition, during the same period, China was investing $4 trillion in 3,000 projects in Asia, Africa, Latin America, and Europe. So Chinese policy driven by economic interests, trade, investment. US policy, security-centric, military-driven. I think that's where the problem started. And now, when we talk of the 21st century, the strategic competition in different areas, especially in science and technology, they are either at par or China is overtaking the United States. And I would recommend, since this is a research institution, please read the study done by Harvard University last year in November 2021, authored by Professor Graham Allison, Allison, very famous professor, The Great Tech Rivalry, China versus the US. And he says that last year China is overtaking the US in science technology. They produced 1.5 billion cell phones, 250 million computers, 25 million automobiles. And the area is called STEM, STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. China is either at par or exceeding. And areas like artificial intelligence, 5G, robotics, cloud computing, it's there. And those of you who saw on the television the Beijing Winter Olympics, they were almost entirely run and controlled by robots. So this is the extent and of that development. So in this context, the Ukraine conflict has caused a new kind of cleavage. It has brought into sharp focus the yawning chasm between what is termed as the North and what is termed as the South. For example, interestingly, for the first time in 25 years, Pakistan, India, and China have the same position on a global issue, Ukraine. We all abstained in the United Nations, both in the Security Council and also in the Human Rights Council. Also, of course, Sri Lanka and Bangladesh and other countries also. So it's largely that kind of strong condemnation that was evident that has come in the Western circles did not come about in this from the southern countries. They still see it largely as a European conflict, although different countries are now getting involved in that. It's interesting that Turkish drones are helping Ukraine and the Iranian drones are helping Russia. So two key countries. And somebody also mentioned Pakistan today, although there's no reference to that. But so that is an interesting new dimension to the whole thing. In this regional scenario, one new element is a very important change which is taking place in the region also, and which I'd like to also mention, Saudi Arabia, because that has an impact on countries like Pakistan also, because we have very close ties with Saudi Arabia. The US-Saudi relationship has become, there's a gap now. And under Mohammed bin Salman, the Prime Minister and Crown Prince, Saudi Arabia is seeing not just a major transformation within their society, but Saudi Arabia is also looking at foreign policy options other than the US. And for 70 years, there was this understanding or arrangement, oil for security. Saudi oil was provided somewhat cheaply and in an uninterrupted manner to the West, to the United States. And in return, the United States would guarantee the security of Saudi Arabia. I think that arrangement seems to have fallen apart now. Things have changed. The Americans do not need that kind of Saudi oil. They have shale gas also. They have other internal issues. Although they need Saudi oil to be pumped because for the Ukraine conflict. And the Saudis also are looking at Asian options, China, even Russia, India, Pakistan, and so forth. So this is going to be a very important new element in the situation. The region where we come from, Pakistan's foreign policy can be seen in three the core of it, in three major circles. One is our neighborhood of neighbors, India, China, Afghanistan, and Iran. That is the core, which is the focus, as it should be in any countries. Second is the larger Muslim world, especially the Middle East. For example, we are talking of the World Cup in Qatar, which begins on 22nd of November. Pakistan Army is providing the security for Qatar World Cup. And that shows a certain confidence of Qatar in Pakistan's reliability as a security ally. And because it's the biggest sporting event of all time, the World Cup soccer. I'm just giving you an example. And we already have a military arrangement with Saudi Arabia since 1982, defense agreement with them. So that second one. And the third one is our relationship with the West, especially the United States and with European countries. With the EU, we have a very robust trade. And we have also provided humanitarian supplies for Ukraine, because Ukraine is among 3 European countries with which Pakistan has a military relationship. Ukraine, Italy, and Spain. And so we have had this good interaction with Ukraine, and that is why Pakistan has been providing them humanitarian supplies. So in that context, with the United States, it's been an on-again, off-again relationship. It's been a more tactical relationship. Although Pakistan has been playing a very positive role with the United States in the region. We were the bridge between US and China in 1971. Dr. Kissinger flew from Chaklala Air Base in a PIA plane on 8th of July 1971 when he went on a secret visit to China, and Pakistan facilitated it. Our president of that period, General Yahya Khan, and 2 Foreign Service distinguished personnel, Foreign Secretary Sultan Mahmud Khan Saab and Agha Hilali Saab, who was our ambassador in Washington. But the US now has seeing the situation in a different light, because we see that there is the makings of what some people feel is a new Cold War. And that is where the problem rises. People are saying that the US now sees China as a security and a strategic threat. And this is documented in the US National Security Strategy, which was issued last month in October, which is in the internet. And more important, NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which is based in Brussels. Their new document, NATO in 2030, and please read that document, those of you who are seriously interested. It has said the biggest challenge is Russia and China. And I talked to the NATO person, I was there. I said that for last time I remember, China was part of Asia, not part of the North Atlantic. It's 3,500 miles away from the Atlantic. But they put China also in that. And the last summit of NATO, which was held in Madrid, where 4 Asian countries were invited: Australia, New Zealand, South Korea, and Japan. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are, it reminds me of the famous song of the Carpenters, "It's Yesterday Once More," when we talk of this Cold War. Again, the issues are being framed in ideological terms as if it's a fight between democracy and dictatorship. That's what President Biden has been saying. And then creating an enemy. We thought that after all this war on terror, after all these killings in the last 20 years, Asia needs peace, Asia needs connectivity, Asia needs cooperation. And yesterday, the ambassador High Commissioner took me to the FinTech exhibition, and it was very impressive, the speech of Deputy Prime Minister Lawrence Wong, and how Singapore is now the hub of this IT sector also, and also a hub of trade connectivity. And that is what Asian people would like. More regionalism, more connectivity through trade, through investment, through cooperation, and through commerce. And Pakistan's relationship in China today, the core of that is this economic dimension. Since you mentioned the visit, in this visit, 2-3 things have happened which is important. The railway project, which was stalled for a while, it's called Main Line 1, ML1, which starts from Karachi and goes till Peshawar. It's about 1,172 kilometers. That is going to be transformed, dual carriage, and also upgradation also. And it's going to be a project of $9.6 billion for the next 10 years, and different phases will be there. So this will be the most important upgradation of Pakistan's railway and modernization since independence. And as you know, China has already done it with Laos, Thailand, and China railway, and also the Bandung, Jakarta railway, and also the Mombasa, Nairobi railway in Africa. The other important thing is that the agreement has been signed that trade, cross-border trade between Pakistan and China will also be conducted in yuan. So RMB, the currency. So it's otherwise previously it was pegged only to the dollar, but now it's RMB. So that is again a very major change. And that is happening like India-Russia trade in oil is in rubles and rupees, for example. And Iran-Russia trade is also in Rial and rupees also. So this is going to be extremely important. And already also there's an agreement that the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, CPEC, which was launched in 2015 and which has generated 75,000 jobs and which has been important for Pakistan's energy and infrastructure, and also the launching of the Gwadar port. That is also going to get a stimulus with other major new projects being there. And as of now, there are 28,000 Pakistani students who are studying in China, People's Republic of China. And China has also offered 20,000 scholarships for the next 3 years to Pakistani students to study in different fields. So this kind of cooperation in the field of education, economy and culture and especially the next focus is going to be on agriculture, IT, and special economic zones. Of course, there are problems. There are problems of security. There are also problems of, I think the biggest problem in Pakistan for investment is bureaucratic red tape. The British left behind a great legacy, which we have in India also, in Pakistan and Bangladesh. That, I think, has to be slashed. We talk of a one-window operation. I was told that in Singapore it takes 20 minutes or half an hour to start a company. And I remember just before the COVID, I was having dinner with the mayor of Shanghai. And I said, if I want to start a company in Shanghai, I'm just hypothetically speaking, how long will it take? He said 24 hours. Shanghai. Not all of China, but Shanghai, you can do that. So that's Communist Party of China, bureaucracy and everything. They are so good. And Dubai also, we know that. So I think that is one of the biggest impediments. But the way is going to be extremely important. With India, we have tried to build a better relationship. I, as a journalist, started the first Pakistan-India track 2. And those days, I was editor of the Muslim, and I feel that neighbours cannot be wished away. You have to have a good relationship with neighbours. And I used to write for the Indian press, and the Indian journalists used to write for my newspaper, the top Indian journalists. And I used to write for Times of India, Hindustan Times, and the Telegraph. And so there was more interaction. But right now, I think that unfortunately, India is going to have elections in 2024. India too is following an ideological foreign policy. Although Mr. Modi is capable of taking out-of-box initiatives. So he can spring surprises also. But we feel that so far the veto which they have on SARC, unless that is lifted, we don't go anywhere. So as a counter to that, we have started with the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, SCO. India is also a member of that. But that kind of regional approach has to be taken forward. But so far, after the India-China clash, the Indians sent a message to us that we want to have the ceasefire on the line of control. It was the Indian initiative. We responded positively. The ceasefire is holding between India and Pakistan, which is a good thing. Which is good for Kashmiris on both sides of the line of control. And we feel that the tensions will not be raised in India-Pakistan relations, but the relations will remain frozen till after the elections in Pakistan, which are 2023, and the elections in India, which are in 2024. So with the US and China balancing, we are very clear about our interests. We have not taken sides. We told the US in the 60s also when they were putting pressure on Pakistan And it was a more difficult decision in the 60s, actually. And I'd like to narrate to you a conversation of President Field Marshal Ayub Khan with President Johnson after the 65 war. President Ayub Khan went, and I must commend President Ayub Khan for taking a strong stand. He went to the White House, and Johnson was very upset. He was from Texas, and he was, could be rough also at times. He said, look here, you guys, you are our people, and you are flirting with the Chinese. At that time, flirtation was a bad word. 50 years ago. You're flirting with the red Chinese, the communist Chinese. And how can you do that? You are our allies, and we don't like this and that. And China is a big threat, like they're saying now also. He said, look here, Mr. President. If we break with the US, bad relation with the US, we damage our economy. But if we break with China, we damage our country and our national security. So we cannot compromise on that. November 1965, conversation of President Johnson and President Ayub Khan. That remains the bottom line of Pakistan's China policy with everything. So we are very clear. Relations with China are strategic. They are old. They are time-tested. We have stood by each other's core interests. Chinese have made no extraordinary demands on us. We helped them when they were isolated. I went to China as a student. I was studying in FC College in Lahore, and as a young teenager, I went there in the 70s, and I saw the China of Chairman Mao, and I was surprised. China was poor, China was weak, China was isolated, and Pakistan, I thought, was a very well-developed country at that time in the 70s, and I said, look at China, and there was hardly any car there. I only had one red flag, that car, and one hotel, Peking Hotel, which is still there, of course. And then I went again under the period of Deng Xiaoping. Then I studied about China. So I've had in the last 40 plus years about 80 plus visits to China, 89. And I've seen China of Xi Jinping. You can never be an expert on China. You can be a student of China, because China is quite complicated. But what I'm saying is that with Pakistan, that's why we say it's all weather, irrespective of the changes that take place either in Pakistan or in China, or the region or the world. The relationship between Pakistan and China has been consistent, steadfast, and all weather. Good weather, rough weather, they stand by us, we stand by them. Because it's a mutual interest and a mutual worldview that we look at the world. And this relationship is not directed against any third country or any other country. So we feel the US has to understand that thing. With the US also, I was in Washington recently for a conference, and I met people and the policymakers, and I said, look here. They were saying Pakistan this and that. I said, look here, you guys, you should know. Pakistan is the only game in town for you guys. You only have Modi as a friend. Russia is off limits. China is off limits. Central Asia is off limits for you. Iran won't talk to you. Afghanistan won't talk to you. Who's in the region? And already you're seeing Muslim major powers emerge who were very pro-West in their own lines. Turkey, Saudi Arabia, even Pakistan, they're having their own policies. Turkey is buying arms from Russia. Saudi Arabia has already had this agreement with Russia. So Pakistan's location is very key. And this was mentioned very early on in the first interview given by the great leader, the founder of Pakistan, Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah, in his first interview to a foreign journalist, which was an American journalist, Margaret Bork White, a lady from Life magazine. And this interview is on Google, 5th of January 1948. And Quaid is on the cover of Life magazine, which was a famous magazine. The interview took place in, I think, October, November. It was published in January. And it's worth reading. And she asked the Quaid, and remember at that time, Pakistan was facing problems. There was a refugee influx, refugee exodus. 10 million people, population was transferred from both sides. There were a million people dead because of the riots and partition. India was holding up our money. There was hardly an army or bureaucracy. We were at war with India on Kashmir. So that time Quaid-e-Azam said that, she asked, what is Pakistan's role going to be? He said, Pakistan is at a strategic place. It's a pivot of the world placed on the frontier where the future geopolitics revolves. And that's where we have. last 50 years, we have played a very key role in the shaping of world geopolitics, starting from China and the opening to America, or even the ending of the Cold War. The last big battle of the Cold War was fought in Afghanistan, where it helped in the demolition of the Berlin Wall, demise of communism in Eastern Europe and Soviet Union, and also our own role. And also, we realized after 71 that our security cannot be outsourced. So we have to do it on our own. We had agreements with the United States which were never fulfilled. We joined SEATO, Southeast Asia Treaty Organization, with Thailand and Philippines. We joined CENTO, Central Treaty Organization, with Iran and Turkey and the US. We had a bilateral agreement. We had a base in Badaber in Peshawar. But still, 71 happened. So we have, for our own security, we developed our nuclear program. And it was a response to the Indian nuclear program. So we did it for our security. And by the grace of God, in 24 years, we completed that. And it's a foolproof, safeguarded program, which is just for protection. And I think it serves as a deterrence. And I was fortunate to be the spokesman for Pakistan when we went nuclear in May 1998 as the information minister of Pakistan. And I said that while India has gone nuclear for its status, we have gone nuclear for our security. So that's a difference. So in that context, there is a balance of deterrence between India and Pakistan which holds. And so we live in a very difficult world, but I feel that this world is now being transformed. What the hawks in the United States are saying. And yesterday I was at a conference of Think Asia in the Shangri-La, where I was one of the speakers. Kishore Mehbubani, who's one of the very eminent Asian intellectuals and scholars, who's the dean of the Lee Kuan Yew School, he also spoke there. And he said he's just come from the US, and on China and the US there is consensus. The only difference is between the hawks and the super hawks. So there are no doves on China. So, and I think that they're making that mistake. We are on the right side of history. The Asian resurgence is there. The Asian century is dawning. And we want to be part of that Asian connectivity and cooperation, especially on economy and trade. Pakistan has a young population of 220 million. 65% of the population is less than 35. Pakistan now has developed, and I think it's, despite difficulties, we are probably the freest Muslim democracy. There's a lot of vibrance in our society. Women's activism, youth activism, the media revolution which took place, and also the nuclear program, that has instilled national self-confidence in the Pakistani system. So I think that I don't see a conflict in Asia for the future between India and Pakistan. I think India and Pakistan represent great civilizations, and I think we can try to solve our problems on our own through dialogue and discussions. Hopefully when the situation is right, we can do that. And but any kind of Cold War would be unacceptable for Pakistan. We will not be part of that effort, because that is not in our national interest, that is not in the interest of Asia, and that is also not in the interest of the United States. But the US has what President Eisenhower called in his final speech on 17th of January 1961, the military-industrial complex. That military-industrial complex is always looking for enemies. They had the Soviet Union, then after the Cold War, then they looked for Muslims and Islam, then they did that, what they had to do, and now they're looking at China. And one reason people are very upset, in my view, especially in the West, why China is rising is because China is a non-Western, non-white power, which is challenging the West after so many centuries. And I think that is also an underlying feature. They used to have the same sentiment about Japan in the 70s when Japan was also rising, but Japan was then taken care of, but China is there. So I think that we should all, Professor Iqbal Singh Sebia, India and Pakistan, others should be part of the Asian century and take this forward, as Allama Iqbal had said 90 years ago, Dekh mashriq se ubarte hue suraj ko dekh. And see the sun rising in the east. The sun is rising, and the Asian resurgence is before us. So we feel that it's important that Asian countries play that role. Of course, we have difficulties, we have issues. India is already having its own issues on the Hindutva. There is that issue. The Kashmir issue is unresolved. We are very clear that Kashmir should be resolved according to the hopes and aspirations of the Kashmiri people. In the Middle East, Palestinian issue is there. So you can't wish issues away, but at least we can talk as civilized people and discuss and negotiate and try to build a better tomorrow with no overlords and no underdogs. Thank you very much. I'm open to any comments, questions, or criticisms, anything. Most welcome on any subject pertaining to Pakistan or the region.
Thank you, Senator Hussain, for that rich and candid talk.
We call it Khula Dulla.
Khula Dulla. And also, you know, it's not easy to insert eloquent poetry into geopolitics. So you 100 for that as well. I'm sure that you know that you've given us I know that you've given us a fair amount to think about and chew upon, and I'm sure there'll be questions in the crowd. But I promise not to impose my position as chair.
No, you can do that. You are the boss. You're the boss.
But maybe I'll ask you to develop on something that you mentioned. One of the things that you've at various parts of your talk, you've highlighted the important geostrategic position of Pakistan, especially given the new world order that's developing, the new economic order that's developing as well. And at the start of your talk, you mentioned that Pakistan could develop as the hub of connectivity in the future. I found that very interesting line. Could you develop on what you foresee and what you meant by hub of connectivity?
First of all, just you mentioned about Pakistan's role, and then I'll come to the hub. You see, Pakistan emanated from a very great idea, which started from Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, the founder of Aligarh Muslim University, and for the resurgence of the Muslims, which was then picked up by Allama Iqbal, then taken forward by the Qaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah and Qaid-e-Millat Liaquat Ali Khan, and also Madre-Millat Fatima Jinnah. She was the first presidential candidate in any country of the world who contested elections in '65. And had the election been fair, she would have won the presidency. Now it's very fashionable for women to be in politics, but everybody supported her. Look at that. So it's a tribute. So that, and even in that time, Pakistan's role is not just shaped by that we don't have oil, we don't have money, but the idea is Qaid-e-Azam's vision, Allama Iqbal's vision, was a big vision. Like, for example, I'll just give you two examples. We are located in South Asia. Pakistan is the only non-Arab country which has taken... Pakistan is the only non-Arab country which has taken part in two Arab-Israeli wars. In 1967, Jordan Air Force, Pakistani pilots. In 1973, Syrian Air Force, Pakistani pilots. 1992, Bosnia. Bosnian Muslims were being exterminated. They were victims of genocide, ethnic cleansing. We had no overseas Pakistanis in Bosnia, Yugoslavia. We had not much trade with them. We had not much political interaction with them. But we were the first country to give them support. And if today there's a Republic of Bosnia-Herzegovina, it's thanks to Pakistan. I went there in 1993, in the Christmas. There was no electricity in Sarajevo. It was minus 30 temperature. They were killing Muslims with snipers. They were unarmed. We gave them anti-tank missiles and other support. I met the president, Ali Izzat Begovich. He gave me a book. The book was titled Islam Between East and West. And I opened the book. It said, dedicated to the memory of Dr. Muhammad Iqbal, poet of the East. I was shocked. I said, a person living in communist Yugoslavia who hardly speaks English, he's talking about Iqbal. I said, sir, how did you discover Iqbal? He said, I read him through in English, and also his works are translated in the language. Look at the impact of ideas. So that vision. And that book, Islam Between East and West, Ali Izzat Begovich, dedicated to the memory of Dr. Muhammad Iqbal, your namesake, sir. So easy. When we talk of hub of regional connectivity, where is Pakistan located? And what is our two things, our location and our role? Yes, our location has served geopolitical purposes also, geostrategic. Because we were close to Soviet Union, we had the Bada Bear base. The U-2 plane in 1960, Francis Gary Powers flew from Peshawar, and it was shot down by Khrushchev. We were part of the alliances. Our purpose was against India, the American purpose was against communism. So, but they coincided at a certain time. And later on, we played that other role. Now we feel that we have to shift. Pakistan itself is shifting also. The Pakistani state is being transformed. Now we have multiple power centers. In the past, there was either the military establishment or the political establishment. Now you have a very strong, active media, civil society, parliament, activism. You can see Pakistanis are quite daring people. They speak up. And it's not a dead society. It's a very dynamic society. And it's a culture of resistance there also among them. So that way, it's a certain transition for us also from a national security state to a state which wants connectivity, which wants that national security has to be redefined. I'm chairman of the Defense Committee, and I've said that national security now should be redefined not in military terms, but human security. In military terms, it was F-16 planes, tanks, atom bomb and so forth, standing army. But now we are talking of human security. We have climate change. The floods have been devastating. We have the issue of pandemic, the coronavirus pandemic. We have a one of the security issues of Pakistan is population, growing population, which is so fast. In 30 years, it will be 250 million people. So it has to be redefined. So in that context, it suits Pakistan to leverage its location at the mouth of the Indian Ocean through the Arabian Sea, Gwadar port, Karachi port, and we are the easiest outlet for the Central Asian republics, which I mentioned, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan. They all want that. Even now, yesterday, one of the decisions which is very important has been taken in China about CPEC is expansion of CPEC to include Afghanistan. So it is important. And in fact, we have invited India to join CPEC. India should be part of that connectivity. And I always feel that IPI, Iran, Pakistan, India pipeline was a good project. If we have economic stakes in each other, that will help in alleviating a lot of problems of insecurity and paranoia. Because then you have developed economic stakes. So I think some of these projects can be revived. And in this context, CPEC is for starters. It's the hors d'oeuvres. It's the main meal is yet to come. The best of CPEC is yet to come. Because the connectivity now we are talking about, like Iran, Arab countries rapprochement has begun. Iran, UAE, Iran, Saudi Arabia. That's a very important development. After 30, 40 years, they are normalizing their relations. So if Iran is also there, the Gulf Arab countries are also there, we have good relations with both sides. We are one of the few countries which can talk to the Iranians, to the Saudis, to the Qataris, to the UAE and this region. So we can play that role. Our location and our people are, I feel, the biggest strength is our human resource, because the people of Pakistan are very talented people, creative people. The system is stifling. The system does not give them the opportunity, because the system is very controlled, and at times even the political system, frankly, I would say, and I'm not a traditional politician, it's also controlled by the super rich also. It's an unholy alliance of the urban and rural rich, unfortunately. And that is something happening. Like the world's oldest and the biggest political party in the world is run by an Italian Catholic widow, Congress Party of India. So, politics of dynasty, Rahul Gandhi, Sonia Gandhi, Manika Gandhi, so this is unfortunately, it's all there, or Bandara Naike and so forth. But still, that is changing. So that is important, that the change is there, the awareness is there. So given that context, Pakistan would like to play that role. And also I like to mention about India. I told you that I started the Pakistan-India track too. In Pakistan today, there is no constituency that seeks confrontation with India. Whether it's the military establishment or the political establishment or any political party. The last time India was an issue in any election campaign in Pakistan was, I think, in 1998 or 1990. 1993, 97, 2002, 2008, 2013, 2018. India is not an issue. And people are very relaxed about India. They want cricket, commerce, culture. The other day I was seeing a speech of Mr. Imran Khan, and he was quoting the Indian foreign minister, Jai Shankar, about Ukraine. And he said, look at that. And nobody criticized him, oh, why has he quoted India? So we are very relaxed about India. But unfortunately, in India, there's a Pakistan problem. They need Pakistan bashing to win the elections. We don't need Indian bashing to win our elections. So that is an important difference. And once I hope that that time will come when we don't need that kind of thing. Indian cricket team comes to Pakistan. We lose sometimes to them. We applaud them that they played a great game. Kohli has done this and so has done that. But if they lose to Pakistan, the stadium is burned down. So, you know, there's a difference in that whole thing. So our role, we feel, as a geo-economic role, as a role of connectivity, as a role to provide transit through Gwadar, that is the role that we are seeking. And that is a role which will be very important. The Saudis have just announced an MBS is coming to Pakistan on 19th and 20th of November. They want to build an oil refinery also in Gwadar. So Gwadar port has the potential to emerge as a major hub in the Gulf and the Arabian Sea region also, servicing Central Asia. Because all of Central Asia is closed down. And this is the very old vision of Central Asians. I'll just end this thing. In 1992, I was in Tashkent. I was a journalist. And I was covering the press conference of Islam Karimov. And this was after the breakup of Soviet Union, October 1992. And there was a Taliban delegation there, not the Taliban, Mujahideen delegation there, Professor Rabbani. And I asked Karimov a question that, sir, what do you expect from your relationship with the countries of the region, especially your neighboring countries? And he singled out Pakistan. He said, my vision is that from Tashkent to Tabriz, to Termez, through that Afghanistan to Karachi, there was no Gwadar then, there should be a road link. So we can travel from Tashkent, Termez, Mazar-e-Sharif, and then to Pakistan and the Arabian Sea. And don't forget, Babur came from Uzbekistan also. The Mughal Empire started from there.
Okay, the floor is open, and we'll have we'll circulate the mic. Could I request anybody who's asking a question to just introduce themselves before asking the question, please? Imran. You go question by question.
Oh yeah. Should I individually first?
We'll do individually.
Thank you so much, Senator. Such an insightful talk. You've covered so much history and the breadth of the region and such a host of different topics. I sort of had a couple of questions. You've touched on so many things, I thought perhaps I could pick out a few things and see if there's a connecting thread there. You spoke about the all-weather ironclad friendship between China and Pakistan. I was curious to know a little bit more about what do you think is the driving sort of adhesive that sort of allowed that relationship to endure historically. My second question, second point was about, you talked about quite creatively the creation of a Pipelineistan. Now, how has the Ukraine crisis sort of, has that accelerated the drive for something like that, now that there's pressure on energy and all those resources? I think you touched on TAPI and CASA 1000. Has the Ukraine crisis sort of dampened that or accelerated the momentum for something like that. And the third one was in relation to, you know, the neighbourhood, and you stressed the importance of the neighbourhood. And it was about, is there sort of metrics, conditions or factors that that shapes Pakistan's decision to recognise or not recognise the government in Kabul? So they're kind of they're a little bit disparate, but I'd be interested to know what your thoughts are because of your focus on the region.
Thank you very much.
Oh, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Imran.
Imran Saab, thank you for 3 very good questions. And let me take the second one first, if I may. Ukraine. Yes, the Ukraine crisis actually is not just Pakistan, it's the whole world also. We have taken certain things for granted. Energy, food, those supplies. And suddenly the Ukraine crisis, we have seen that some, even these things can be weaponized. We never realized that food can be weaponized, or, you know, these energy issues. Last time they were weaponized was in the 73 war of Arab-Israeli. So this is brought about. That's why a lot of the other countries, even like India, for example, why they said we want to have it because we need cheap Russian oil to keep our economies going. And Saudis are buying, UAE are buying. They're all very good friends of America. And I think Pakistan is buying some wheat now. And so the Ukraine crisis has accelerated that thinking about Pipelineistan, or that regional connectivity where energy plus food supplies should be a very key element of that, because these are now issues that have become national security issues. They're no longer economic issues, or they're no longer issues which are linked with human security, because they can be controlled, they can be, you know, used as weapons in a conflictual situation. So I think it's a good wake-up call for a lot of these countries who took things for granted. And you know what has happened to the Nord Stream pipeline with Germany. And you know, today, the German Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, is landing in Beijing, along with a very high-powered German industrial delegation. All these BMWs and Volkswagens and BioNTech and Adidas, they are all part of the CEOs. So because they have broken with the Americans on this issue with China because of economy. And so coming to that, the second part, yes, Ukraine has underlined that, reinforced that, accelerated that process. The third question is about Afghanistan. Yes, we have not taken a decision to recognize Afghanistan because we didn't want to be the first to do so. But we have a good working relationship with the regime in Afghanistan. Our only concern is the same as the concern of other countries in the region. We feel that they should ensure that Afghanistan's territory is not used to foment terrorism or destabilize any neighboring country, especially Pakistan. And there's a group which is based in Afghanistan, and this was documented by the United Nations. As you know, the United Nations Security Council report of July 26th mentioned there are 10,000 international terrorists, or 5,000 or 6,000 of them are Pakistan TTP. And there are also some Daesh, some Al-Qaeda, some IMU, Islamic Movement of Uzbekistan, some ETIM, East Turkestan Islamic Movement, which is against China. Then there's Jaish-ul Adl against Iran. Then there's Chechen rebels against Russia. So, you know, so those have to be controlled and countered. So we have held that recognition on that count. But that doesn't mean that we do not have that kind of relationship. Pakistan played a key role. If you saw CNN those days, when there was this last year, the exodus of people, only planes in Kabul airport was PIA planes. We took 27,000 people from 42 countries, evacuation, and over 100,000 Afghan refugees have re-entered Pakistan after that. So we played a very historical, a model role, in fact, of humanitarian assistance, helping everybody, including Indian citizens, including any country citizen, American citizens. And we did receive some thank you from some countries, for which we are grateful. And China. China is a very unique relationship with Pakistan. I think it's probably the most unique relationship in the annals of international relations in terms of a relationship between two neighbors who are unequal in size, different social systems. Now, if we were part of the British Commonwealth, we'll be speaking the English language, we'll be playing cricket. Chinese don't play cricket, they don't speak the English language. But compatibility of interests and a track record of reliability. What do you want in a neighbor? If you're living in Singapore, your next door neighbor, you want that when you are in trouble, the neighbor will help you. You can rely on the neighbor. The neighbor will not hurt you. That is the basic, common human instinct. So this neighbor has stood by Pakistan, and Pakistan has stood by them also. We gave China a window to the world. It started off on an interesting platform, which is very conventional wisdom. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. We had this relationship. The US gave this commitment to Pakistan, to General Ayub Khan, that if we give arms to India, we will first inform Pakistan and we will first consult Pakistan because you are our ally. And India at that time was non-aligned but closer to the Soviet Union. When Nehru wrote the letter to Kennedy in October 1962, asking for arms, asking for military supplies, something he had derided Pakistan for all those years, that why Pakistan is getting American arms, but he did the same because against China. The Americans rushed in. And then the Americans told Pakistan that you will not attack India. And we did not. But we will get a settlement of Kashmir for you. So there were talks between Swaran Singh and Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. 6 rounds of talks took place. But it was turned out to be the dialogue of the deaf, because nothing came out of that. So Pakistan felt betrayed, especially President Ayub Khan, because he was very close to the Americans. And you know that historically, when Kennedy was killed in November 1963, Ayub didn't go to his funeral. He sent Bhutto. Everybody turned out. It was an assassination. Ayub refused to go. He said, and this is a part of history. So that is how it started off. And then the relationship started expanding. First, military sphere, then diplomacy, then economy, and then... So, how does China help Pakistan? What is in it for Pakistan? I say China provides us with diplomatic air cover. UN Security Council, G20, Nuclear Suppliers Group. We are not members of anything. China is always there as our spokesman when we need that. When this annexation of Kashmir took place on 5th August 2019, we went to the UN Security Council. We couldn't go on our own. It through China. And China spoke up for that. Or other issues, China. And we also cover their, I think, security, southern soft underbelly. There are 2 provinces of China which border India and Pakistan, Tibet and Xinjiang. The Tibetan separatist leader is based in India, in Dharamsala, the Dalai Lama. And there's talk of Xinjiang also restive. So Pakistan provides that protective cover for security of China. And that is very, very important. Because China has 14 neighbors. They have agreements on borders with all 12 neighbors except Bhutan and India. And India, they had a conflict. So that kind of relationship. So there's also a convergent viewpoint because we are not directed against any third country. And when China was poor and weak and isolated, we were their window to the outside world. All Chinese diplomacy was conducted through Karachi and Islamabad because China and PIA used to be the first non-communist airline to go there, to Shanghai, since 1964. So it's a relationship of trust, and they have always stood by us and we have stood by their core interests. Even now, China, yesterday's statement mentioned about Kashmir and other areas, and their core interests also we are there, which includes the unity, territorial integrity, and sovereignty of China, which includes their peaceful development, which includes their other interests like Taiwan and so forth, and Hong Kong and Xinjiang. So compatibility of interests, and convergent worldviews, and a track record of trust and reliability. A friend in need is a friend indeed. So that sums up the answer to your question. Thank you.
Francis?
Good afternoon, Senator. And
Good afternoon.
Thank you for the most engaging talk.
Oh, thank you.
I was quite fascinated to hear that, or to learn that the PIA helped to set up
Yes,
Singapore Airlines.
Singapore Airlines is.
Thank you very much.
Ask your founding fathers; they know it. And also your shipping lines, National Shipping
Yeah,
Corporation of
must
Pakistan.
have been. So we owe a great debt to Pakistan.
Thank you.
I'm with the.
You have repaid the debt through this great community of Pakistanis who are living and working here and who still contributing to your.
Indeed. My name is Francis Chong. I'm at the Ministry of Trade and Industry.
Yes, sir.
I have a team that's supposed to work on our trade relations with Pakistan and other countries. So I'd like to take this opportunity to hear your thoughts. Because you mentioned that Pakistan had a very good relations with Indonesia. It helped in resolving konfrontasi, helped Singapore after our independence.
Yes.
That's 2 generations ago. Today, going forward in this new Asian century, can I invite you to share your thoughts and advice and hopes for the relations between Pakistan and Southeast Asia, and of course including Singapore? Thank you.
I think yesterday, first of all, I would like to say that with Singapore, we developed this relationship over the last few decades, and it's very, very solid. And it remained quite solid in the days of Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew. But now certainly, also some of our people and policymakers in Pakistan, we look too much to the West. It's Washington, London and Brussels. We see the world shaped by these. We don't see Singapore or Jakarta or Seoul. I'm an Asianist, although I was educated in America, but I first went to China and the Asian countries. And as I told you, since my father was in Indonesia, I was educated in Jakarta also. So I'm being a Southeast Asianist in that way. I would say that Pakistan for Singapore can be a very important area of opportunity, especially in terms of information technology. I think that when you talk of, we have some of the most brilliant IT professionals and startups. And we can learn from ideas from and it can be mutually reinforcing, because we have a middle class today, which is about 80 million people, which is a huge middle class. Which is fairly well off, and which is educated, which has English as its principal language, and which has a general orientation and a worldview which is international. I'd also like to refer this question to the lady who's sitting here. Rukhsana, aap bhi iska zara jawab de dein. She's the High Commissioner, so I think that utilizing her, because she's been here more hands-on, and she's been badgering me for the last 48 hours, please do something for Pakistan-Singapore relations and cut through the red tape and let's get cracking. So, and I'm fully on board on that.
Thank you so much, sir, for really a very enlightening and exciting talk. Thank you for your question. I think there is a huge potential of building very solid, tangible relations between Pakistan and Singapore. Like Senator Mushahid Hussain just said, we have not yet been able to tap the potential. There is a lot that can be done. Since I've been here in August 2019, my biggest challenge was COVID-19. We started off really well when we flew Pakistan's flag for the first time in FinTech Festival 2019. 8 startups from Pakistan participated in FinTech Festival of 2019. And those startups, when they went back to Pakistan, they did really well. And some of them, their platforms were used by our commercial bank for soft loans, microfinancing of young entrepreneurs. Yesterday also, we went to FinTech Festival
Yes.
together. There are 27 companies participating from Pakistan. There are 5 Pakistani banks present in FinTech Festival.
And also 8 in the fashion festival.
Yes.
8 fashion
yes.
designers.
So there is a lot that can be done. And I'm very happy that since the reopening of Singapore, more and more people are looking at Singapore, and we are having so many delegations coming to Singapore for different reasons, for different, Senator Mushahid Hussain Sayyid has been the first parliamentarian, first senator to visit in 3 years. But later this month, we are expecting the visit of our Minister of Commerce to Singapore. So, for me, the greatest news is that the radar, the Singapore is coming on our radar.
And Minister for Commerce is coming day after tomorrow.
Yes, yes. So, one area that is of great interest to us, common interest to both sides, is fintech, artificial intelligence, information technology, and other services. The other area where the two countries can do a lot together is food sector. Singapore imports, it's a net importer of food items. Pakistan is a net producer of agricultural items. We have been exporting food items to Singapore, but there is a lot that can be done. We are a very big market of agricultural products. We have a very big, processed food industry. We are a big market for meat, poultry, and chicken products. So we are working together with Singaporean Ministry
and
of Trade
fresh fruits also.
Yeah. So, my Singaporean friends wait for me to send them Pakistani mangoes. Dr. Iqbal is one of them.
Me included.
I'll take the liberty, Francis, that Ruxana is inviting you to the Pakistan High Commission for a good cup of tea. You come with your team. No, seriously. Yes, I think, and let's get cracking, and you bring your pencil and paper with you, and she has your team, and tug, let's get cracking. The Nike slogan is just do it. You see, it's not an academic. And I think sky's the limit.
Yes.
Because Pakistanis are very dynamic people. We are globalists. About 10 million Pakistanis don't live in their own country, but they are very strong Pakistanis, but they live outside, all over the world, including Singapore, of course. So I think you should have a meeting with the ambassador. I know she's got fire in her belly. She's got a lot of zing in her. I've known her for a long time. She was in Berlin and other places in Europe and so forth. And I think seize this opportunity.
Thank you very much.
And on her behalf, I'm cordially inviting you, sir. With your team. Yes. Not just a hot cup of tea, but nice samosas and other things also.
There was another question by Masood first. Could I just ask Masood to ask? And because of time, so I saw a few other hands as well, so we'll all keep our questions short, and then we'll come back to that discussion.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much. You have a really fascinating discussion, and you talk a lot of different issues, and you talk about balancing relationship with China, USA, and you have a huge support from China, your economic development, CPEC, all these things. And also, Pakistan has a huge potential country, 80 million your population you mentioned. But can you talk about economics? You see, Pakistani economy is, even today, they export GDP growth, half of Bangladesh even. So what's going on there? Instead of all these things, why economy is performing, underperforming? What's happened there? Can you tell us something about your economic situation?
Yes,
Could I just cluster the question if you don't mind? Then we can wrap up with that. Yeah. Thank you. And there was a question from here as well. Yes. Can I add that? And then maybe.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Senator Saab, firstly, Khosh Amdeed to Singapore. Welcome.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. My name is Irfan Ali Thanvi, and I am a legal advisor, Pakistan passport holder. Madam Roxana knows me considerably well. That was quite an enlightening engagement, I must say, and
Thank you, sir.
amazing. Shall I say, introspective. But one thing which I would like to know, because it's been 75 years, and you mentioned the dynamic interview of late Hazrat Qaid-e-Azam Rahmatullah Alayh on the Life magazine, that Pakistan is going to be something for the future. So when I see the developing world, and I'll be quick about it, Singapore, United States of America, all right, even for that matter Japan, their reliance was never on their neighbors, rather on something spectacular, something outside the box. I'm going to give you a controversial example, maybe that might not suit you or your government, but the state of Israel, their strongest ally is none of their neighbors. As a matter of fact, it's all rivalry. That happened with Singapore as well in 1965. But whether in incognito mode or anything, they went outside the neighbors. So I would like to know just one simple question. Is it high time to think outside the box? 75 years is a good high time. One quick question. The second one, sir, Professor Iqbal, if you don't mind. All developing countries of the world, with all due respect, sir, don't have vaderas, if you understand what I mean to say. The feudal system was squashed by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. Lee Kuan Yew, he was rather the late great Minister Mentor Lee Kuan Yew. He couldn't continue in Malaysia because of the
Bhumiputra.
Exactly, Bhumiputra thing and all the things. So everyone here in Singapore is equal. Keeping LKY example in mind, which is one of the most successful models which we have, don't you think it's high time to shun the feudal system? And I'm giving you reference to Tahmina Daulatana's book, My Feudal Lord, which you have read.
She's the first lady of Pakistan.
Yeah, she is indeed. Thank you very much, Professor Saab. And one last comment about the Professor Saab, about our honorable senator, that he is one man who keeps us alive, Pakistanis alive, and Pakistanis proud. Thank you very
sir.
much.
Thank you, sir.
There's one more brief question from the Could you keep it brief, please? Thank you.
Shukriya. Very just fine.
Thank you,
Sir.
Senator, for a good expose. My name is Moeen. I'm one of the expat, if you like, Pakistanis who settled, made Singapore home.
Yes, sir.
You touched on regional connectivity as a very important aspect in building infrastructure in the region, and I completely understand that. You also mentioned all-weather relationships being important with neighbors. Ironically, I mean, I would have thought that given the floods that have recently occurred, I would have thought climate change and its ramifications are probably the biggest priority, that, because all the infrastructure gets washed away just with one stroke of, nature. So I would have thought that, isn't it time that Pakistan probably plays a leadership role now, having experienced some, a lot of damage and destruction in the COP27 that are being held, etc. So I really would like you to share with us a little bit on that.
Thank you, sir. I'll start with the last question first, Moin Saab's question. Actually, climate change is a subject which is very close to my heart, and I am going to Sharm el-Sheikh. I have 2-3 speeches on 12th to 13th. I'm a member of the Climate Change Committee of Parliament. I went to the COP26 also, and I was the first parliamentarian who had a public hearing in the Pakistan Parliament in 2014 on environment and climate change. And in my own committee, in the Defense Committee, as I said, I redefine it. So when I redefine national security, it includes climate change, food scarcity, water scarcity, and cyber security and population. So human security and climate change is very key. Yes, half of the issue is caused by climate change, the other half is our own responsibilities. Because we have encroached upon banking, the banks of the rivers. We have built on that, and the natural flow of water has been blocked by different vested interests or mafias, and I think that is a very key thing. And that is why, especially in Sindh province and other provinces, people could not get help because the vaderas were there holding their land, their crops, and so forth. So that is the key thing. And in fact, the Indian gentleman is here from the Indian High Commission. I have even proposed to India that on Siachen, let us take a major initiative. What is that initiative? It is the tallest battleground in the world. I have been there as Chairman Defense Committee. Both sides withdraw their forces because the presence of the troops is causing melting of the glaciers. It is leading to avalanches. And the last 10 years, we have had 143 freak weather incidents. Flash floods, forest fires, avalanches, heat waves. So it's affecting every part. Desertification, deforestation. So it is affecting every aspect of that. And we said, let's have Japan or maybe Singapore develop a peace park there. Let the mountaineers go there and let it be a park for peace, because it's not worth fighting for. So climate change affects 500 million people living on the coastal lines of South Asia. Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, And you know that in Maldives there was a cabinet meeting underwater, and in Nepal there was a cabinet meeting in the Himalayas because of the melting glaciers. So this is it's an issue of life and death, and I totally agree with that.
And it transcends
Yes,
boundaries.
it's borderless. It's like coronavirus board. The important thing is that previously our system, by system I mean the Pakistani elite or political system, they didn't have much awareness of this issue, but now the awareness is there. Even General Bajwa in his last speech in GHP talked of climate change and population as important threats. So it's an awareness which has now gone into other things. Thanvi Saab, your question, yes. Interestingly, the one issue which is an issue of discord in US-Israeli relations is Israel's relations with China, because China is investing in the Haifa port, and they and China is one of the biggest contributors to high-tech industries in China, Israel, because of the thing. So in Pakistan's case, frankly, there are very few Muslim role models. You talk of the region, go look beyond the region. Middle East has been totally dependent on the West. I'm talking of barring Israel, the Arab world and so forth. So, we have been actually in the 50s, 60s till 70s, we were the leadership role. So we were the leadership role and model. Malaysians were coming to us, South Koreans were coming to us, we were helping Singapore, we were helping Indonesia, we were helping China. I was reading a book by the Chinese former Deputy Prime Minister, Li Lanqing. The book is called Breaking Through. And he says when China started opening up under Deng Xiaoping in 1978, they said go to 3 countries and learn from them. Pakistan, Singapore and Philippines. All 3 have English also. So he said he was then a technocrat in the Ministry of Trade of China. He came to Pakistan. And he speaks glowingly of Pakistan in the 80s. He says your Karachi port was thriving. You had a very good bureaucracy. And he says the World Bank and Asian Development Bank asked us that we'll give you loans. He said we did not know how to make a feasibility study. We learned from the Pakistanis. How do we write the feasibility study? What do we write in it? So they went to Singapore also and the Philippines. So you see, we have been a role model in that regard. Unfortunately, it's the Vaderas and the Vaderas mindset, which is the sense of entitlement. That I come from a rich and famous daddy or mommy or whatever, and then I have this sense of entitlement. I have to be this belongs to me. That is naughty. But that is now being changed, and I think the power of public opinion is doing that. And in that regard, I think no names right now, but prominent politicians have played a key role in promoting that awareness also. Masood Saab, your question about the economy. About the economy, the main issue has been that if you see the first 30 years of Pakistan, our economy was doing very well. And from 47 till the 70s. Industrial development, we were almost a role model for most Asian countries, even in terms of growth rates. About India, they used to say there's a Hindu rate of growth, which is 2% to 3%. And that was there till 1991, till Manmohan Singh Saab came, and then he became the Prime Minister, and they opened up. And then under Mr. Modi, it's really gone big time. But in Pakistan's time, that was there. The first problem started with the nationalization in the 70s, under Mr. Bhutto. You see, we have a very misguided notion of socialism. Socialism means takeover of it. Even schools, colleges were nationalized. Ginning factories were nationalized. That destroyed the Pakistani private sector, which is a very dynamic private sector. And there was a hate campaign, there are 22 families and they control the wealth. And obviously, when countries rise, there are income inequalities. Even in China. Now Xi Jinping is trying to reverse that income inequality, which has become bigger. He said now it's greater good of all society. But that was something we suffered a setback for at least 2 decades. Then the Afghan war started. And then a dependency syndrome came in the Pakistani political and military class. IMF, US dependency. You know, we have gone to the IMF how many times? 22 times. So I told the finance minister, I said, this is a tried, tested and failed formula. Why don't you cut on the subsidies to the Western interests? Sugar cartel, cement cartel, this car assembly cartel. You know, they like for importing sugar, they get a rebate. For exporting sugar, they get a rebate. And you know, these people, and they become fat cats in the process, thanks to the state subsidies. So I think the process of economic decision making, in my view, has to be radically altered. And this kind of dependency syndrome that we are asking, that we get bailouts because we are a strategically important country. And they say Pakistan is just too important to fail. So they won't let it there. But it's not like Sri Lanka, because basically there is strength in Pakistan's informal sector in the economy, which is not documented. And they don't pay taxes, unfortunately, because they don't trust. The taxation system itself is extremely corrupt. And I have even said that maybe we can privatize it or give it on, you know, something that at least it will generate more revenues and it will be a more transparent system. So I think it's a built-in problem within the Pakistani economic decision-making system. And it involves our elite, it involves our political decision makers, and we are not willing to take tough decisions. What are the tough decisions? For example, there's a thing called the Karachi Steel Mill. It is not functioning for last 10 years, but there are 10,000 people, they're getting paid every month because they don't want to privatize it for political reasons. For example, now this is totally wastage. And you have this kind of wastage a long time. Also, I was chairing the parliamentary committee on CPEC, on China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, and I looked at the power sector. Every day, Pakistan suffered losses of 1.5 billion rupees, either through leakages, through corruption, or through an antiquated system of, you know, electricity distribution. So that has to be, you have to bring in meters which are electronic, but then the Western interest in WAPDA and those organizations will be affected. So it requires to overhaul the system to solve the problem. There has to be a continuity. Bangladesh, what happened? Bangladesh, 2-3 things happened. I lived in Bangladesh. I was studying in Dhaka, in Adamji Cantonment Public School, and empowerment of women. Also, I think, frankly, the role of religion has been also contained in economic development and population. The population of Bangladesh used to be 3.6% growth when in Pakistan days. Now it's 2% less than that, less than 2%. So that also made a difference. And continuity of policies. You may differ with Hasina Wajid on a lot of issues, but the policies have been very, very consistent. And I was talking to the chief executive of Bexingho in Dhaka. And they are investing $1 billion in a plant in North Carolina. Bangladesh is investing. Bexingho, the top, and they don't produce cotton. We produce cotton, but they are making more cotton and denim projects. So it's not a rocket science. It's a political will is needed, and a change in course is needed. See, when you know that there's a course correction, you can do that. What happened in China after Mao Zedong? Deng Xiaoping said this is not the right course. We do a course correction. And let the Chinese people, who are a very creative people, hard-working people, let them let market forces decide. And that changed the destiny of China and lifted 800 million out of poverty in 40 years. So I think we need a course correction on the economy and decision making and the mindset. And the Madeira mindset is the key element in that. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I have to call the discussion to a close, but I know that the discussion will actually carry on the sidelines. So I welcome everybody to stay on, to continue informally in your own breakout groups to discuss the issues that we've been talking about. Thank you, Senator Hussain, for that rich discussion and the candid answers to the questions as well. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a great pleasure.
Sure.
And thank you, sir, all of you,
Pleasure.
ladies and gentlemen, for your patience and for your participation.
And I'd like to thank the Pakistani High Commission of Singapore as well for organizing this event. And
Thank you for organizing it on such a short notice.
Our pleasure.
Thanks a lot.
Our pleasure.
और कैसर साहब आप और रुकैया मिलके जाएं High Commissioner को.
So
And
please
Francis,
join
you
me.
give your card to the High Commissioner.
Please join me in thanking Senator Hussain. Please.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Very kind of you.
This could have